All right, I'm here. Twitch.tv/110sports, 110sportsmedia.com/live, wherever you might be joining us from. Thank you so much for making us a part of your day on a Monday. You know, the least surprising thing in sports is when the team that's down 2-0 comes back and wins Game 3. That's what happened in the Miami-Boston series. Boston, finally capitalizing on the fact that they looked like the better team in the first half of the game. Held on to that lead. We've got like a week between Game 3 and Game 4, so no basketball tonight. But man, aren't AD and Jokic good? Really good basketball game last night. Nuggets, Lakers. Lot of fun. Really, really great game there. We got a lot to get to today on the show. Appreciate you guys joining the show on a Monday. Listen, we had a lot going on this weekend. We had basketball. We'll get to that here in about 20 minutes or so. We had football. We had a ton of football, and we had a ton of injuries, unfortunately, which is, and it wasn't just injuries to role players, and it wasn't just injuries on bad teams. It was injuries to stars, injuries to, fantasy football icons, injuries to starting quarterbacks. Injuries to starting quarterbacks on teams that had aspirations of winning divisions. And it's completely, in certain spots, completely changed the outlook of divisions, completely changed the outlook of AFC, NFC, completely changed the dynamic in the league, at least for the next few weeks. And there are some of these injuries that we'll get to at 11:40 or so that really impact the rest of the season. Because there are some here, and we'll talk about them, there are some here that are permanent, and some that are not good at all. But we'll get to that in about 35 minutes or so. But what I want to talk about first, and this is very selfish because when there's NBA playoffs in week 2 of the NFL, those things probably take precedence in terms of popularity. But I want to talk about golf, the U.S. Open at Winged Foot. Bryson DeChambeau, man, ultimately wins this event by 6 strokes, finishes at -6, shoots a final round 67th. 3 of his 4 rounds under par, which is just ridiculous at Winged Foot. His round 3 was a 70, sort of held strong there. Matt Wolff, a couple rounds of 4 under par or better, but his 2 rounds in between 74 and 75, he went out and shot 4 under, then shot 4 over. Round 3, a disgusting 5 under, hitting just 2 fairways in that round, but then a 75 on Sunday. He didn't exactly blow up. You can argue that 4 over through your last 9 holes is blowing up to a certain extent, but 4 over through your last 9 holes at Winged Foot is kind of like 1 over even at most golf courses. You don't have to hit shots all that far offline to lose shots in a hurry at Winged Foot, which is part of what I want to talk about. And we'll talk about the driving accuracy here in a minute. But here's what we learned. First of all, Bryson DeChambeau completely validating his science experiment over the weekend. This experiment of, let's just turn golf into... So first of all, he turns golf into a science. And basically makes it as numbers oriented and as, X's and O's and as meticulous as you could possibly make it. This is the guy who a couple years ago had a spray bottle and was spraying water onto his ball on the driving range one morning to simulate what the ball might be doing when he gets out onto the golf course and there's still dew on the ground. That's who we're talking about here. And then this off season, he said, "I'm gonna gain a ton of weight. I'm gonna beef up, beefy Bryson, man, and I'm gonna try to hit it as far as I possibly can." And he came back and he looked like a linebacker. Looked bigger. He looks absolutely ridiculous in golf clothes when he's that huge. He looks ridiculous. But man, does it work. And he got a lot of flack for it, and it was, initially it was, the skeptics were, can this actually work? And then when he comes back at the restart and is clearly playing well, he gets a win. You're like, okay, but can he really do this in a major? He hung around at the PGA Championship at TPC Harding Park a few weeks ago. So he very quickly showed that it can be done. Very quickly he did that. Since the restart, and I gotta go back a season here because technically we're in the 2021 season now. But in 2020, when he came back at the Charles Schwab, since the return, a T3, a T8, a T6, a win at the Rocket Mortgage Classic, missed the cut at the Memorial, but then and a T30 at the World Golf Championship, but then a T4 at the PGA, a 22nd at the Tour Championship, and then a win at Winged Foot. He was the only player to break par. Winged Foot in 2006, Jeff Ogilvy won that tournament at +5. And, through the first round, it was like, ooh, they're kind of tearing up this golf course. And then you had, you had several players. You had several players under par to start the final round. Matthew Wolff was leading the tournament. He was -5 after that 5 under on Saturday, and then but you get to the end of this tournament, and DeChambeau, a 6-shot win over Wolff, who finished with a 75, like I said, -6 DeChambeau, and then you get Wolff at even par, and then your top 10 is +2, +3, +4, +5, +5, +6, +6, +6, +6, +6. You finished T8 with a +6. Rory McIlroy, a couple rounds under par, but he had 2 rounds of +5 or better, or worse, excuse me, and finished in the top 8. Rory McIlroy, the king of, I'm not sure you can categorize this as a backdoor when he shoots 75 on the last day. But, Rory notching another top 10. It's now been 6 years since he won a major. 2014 at Valhalla was the last time that he won a major. You got the Masters coming up in November. I find, every time we get to the Masters, I want to believe that Rory's going to be in contention, a golf course that that is not overly long and is no longer a course that, players can't overpower in a lot of spots. I mean, we're talking about that, the par 5s are incredibly gettable at Augusta. And if you play those really well, you're going to have a really, really awesome chance to win the golf tournament. And Rory, best driver of the golf ball ever. But here's what we learned at the U.S. Open, specifically from the final round. First, Bryson DeChambeau, doing something that had never been done before. He basically took accuracy out of the equation and if at the very least sacrificed that for hitting it as far as he possibly could. After winning the tournament, he talked about how he's going to experiment with a 48-inch driver, which is which is the USGA limit for how long, USGA PGA Tour, for how long your driver can be. For comparison, the average driver length is roughly 44.5 inches, somewhere around there. So we're talking about 3.5-ish more inches, which is a lot when we're talking about a driver. He talked about wanting to hit at 360, 370. He's hoping to beef up even more before the Masters in November. But listen, he's, as long as his Who cares if he's not hitting a fairway if he's hitting at 360, 370? And he proved that you can do it even on a golf course like Winged Foot, which is you're supposed to, like, if you don't hit the fairway, there you have no shot. Like that's the thing with a normal U.S. Open golf course. The course is going to be fast as heck. Specifically talking about greens. And the point being is that if you miss the fairway, it's impossible to hold a green. Because you're coming out of the rough to a rock hard green that's hard to hold, and you need a lot of spin, and it just doesn't happen if you're coming out of the rough. DeChambeau was tied for 26 in fairways hit the fewest fairways of a U.S. Open winner ever. 23 of 56 possible fairways, tied for 26 with 41.07 driving accuracy off the tee. And he won the golf tournament. He was 325 on average. Matthew Wolff was 333, I believe, on average. Neither of them hit a lot of fairways, but we're talking about the number 1 and number 2 in the golf tournament. Despite the driving inaccuracies, DeChambeau is top 5 in greens and regulation. So far down the hole, and he's so strong that he just gets it out of the rough. And there's just nothing you can do as a golf course superintendent, as the tour, as the USGA, trying to protect its golf course. Protect meaning making it, where does the golf course get its teeth? Like if you go over to play the old course at St. Andrews, if it's not windy at all, then that's a very, very gettable golf course. The fairways are huge. You got some pot bunkers in there, but the what makes U.S. Open, British Open golf so, captivating is how much carnage there can be because of how bad the winds and the weather can get to. A U.S. Open golf course, a normal U.S. Open golf course, normal, and I say normal because, you've had your U.S. Opens at Chambers Bay and at Erin Hills where, Erin Hills you're hoping to get a ton of wind because the golf course was really, the fairways were huge. And then you didn't get wind that week, and I think Brooks Koepka was like 14 under par or something that week, 16 under par, something like that. Pebble Beach, you're hoping to get a ton of wind and rain. When you don't, you get 11 under or whatever it was from Gary Woodland last year. Chambers Bay was just kind of dumb, and not really being sure where the fairway is the teeth on that golf course. But on a golf course like Winged Foot, and then you're talking about Oakmont, you're talking about Shinnecock, those kind of golf courses, when you're looking at those golf courses, you're looking at tight fairways, fast, treacherous greens, and high rough. A golf course built to protect itself, even when the conditions aren't bad. And the conditions weren't bad in this one. They were actually quite good. But DeChambeau, his science experiment, has basically taken accuracy out of the equation in terms of a premium and put it in and replaced it with more driving distance. And he's so strong that the rough's just not that big a deal. He still managed to be top 3 in strokes gained off the tee, approach, and around the greens. He was top 20 in putting, which was plenty. And so he did what you're not supposed to be able to do, which is sort of spray the ball and not hit it super straight and still win the golf tournament. I mean, in terms of driving accuracy, in terms of fairways hit, Brendan Todd and Sung J M were 1 and 2. They both finished outside of the top 20. Nobody inside the top 5 of driving accuracy finished inside the top 5. Harris English was 8th in driving accuracy, finished 4th. But Louis Oosthuizen was 3rd, finished tied for 20th in driving accuracy. Zach Johnson tied for 8th. in the tournament, tied 20th in driving accuracy. Bryson DeChambeau, T26, won the golf tournament. And Matthew Wolff, 19 of 56 fairways, and he finished second. There's just nothing the USGA can do if that's going to be the case. I mean, Matt Wolff hit 2 of 14 fairways in round 3 and was 5 under par. 2 of 14 and was 5 under par. At Winged Foot. That's not supposed to happen. The other thing that we learned this weekend is that there is no one right way to play golf. I mean, we're talking about Bryson DeChambeau. Okay, so you know, we marvel at beautiful golf swings, and I'm all for beautiful golf swings. Rory McIlroy's golf swing, Adam Scott's golf swing, money, beautiful. Colin Morikawa's golf swing, beautiful. Louis Oosthuizen's golf swing, beautiful. But in your final round, you had Bryson DeChambeau, who basically swings with his arms as straight as possible. That's oversimplifying it a touch, but we'll just say that. All of his irons are the same length. He's 250 pounds. And all he's trying to do is hit the ball as far as he possibly can. He's swinging it really, really fast back and through. When everybody who's played golf, believe me, has been told, nice slow takeaway, smooth in transition. Your speed needs to be the most at the bottom when you're hitting the golf ball, which is true. That's what Bryson's doing. But, you know, he's getting all hyped up and then swinging it as fast as he can. So nobody's ever done that before. And he just won a U.S. Open doing it. And then you have Matt Wolff. And if you know what Matt Wolff's golf swing looks like, you know what I'm talking about. Matt Wolff, who does a lot of over the line, and he's got this big leg kick kind of thing going on, but he is money, man. There might not be anybody on the planet that I like watching strike irons right now than Matthew Wolff, because he hits this beautiful high draw over and over and over again, which is one of the toughest shots in golf to hit consistently. And he does it. And it's a lot of fun, and he is just fun to watch. Those two guys coming in first and second at the U.S. Open is the epitome of, listen, there are a lot of ways to win golf tournaments now. And there's a lot more about what's going on in between the ears, and, you know, we can talk about, you know, at impact their golf swing looks the same if you want to, and I'll concede that. But there are a lot of ways to approach the game differently now. And these two guys finishing first and second at the U.S. Open is nothing, is just more evidence of that. So shouts to Bryson, man, because I was certainly skeptical. Was certainly skeptical of his ability to win majors at the highest level doing this. I thought his science experiment would be proven wrong, and that there are just better ways to do it. But on Sunday at Winged Foot, he had it figured out in a way that nobody else did. And he was bombing it and then just hacking it out. Getting up and down. Putting well. And got the job done. It really was impressive. And a testament to how hard he's worked, and a testament to the fact that there's a lot of ways to win golf tournaments nowadays. I'm fascinated to see, you know, because he immediately talked about how he wants to get bigger by the Masters. And he says he's going to start working with Cobra, his equipment sponsor and provider, trying to put together a 48-inch driver. Because if he goes to Augusta and he's hitting driver on 13 because if you hit a 380-yard drive at 13 at Augusta, if you know what I'm talking about, it's a dogleg left. And, you know, when Bubba won one of his majors, there was on Sunday one year, he was like 115 yards from the green because he hit this big banana slice around that corner and ended up 120 yards from the 13th green. If Bryson hits 100, gets the right shot shape and he's hitting at 380, I mean, he's going to do the same thing. And that's a gettable golf course if you specifically for a right-hander, if you can move it right to left and you're hitting it a long way, that's a very, very gettable golf course. And we've never seen it played in November, so we'll see what the weather, what kind of impact the weather has, and if it's different from April. Because there are times when the Masters are in April that the wind is scary. That's what happened when Zach Johnson won. I don't know what his final score was, but it was somewhere around par. And he was laying up on every par 5 and trying to take some of that wind variable out of it and end up winning the golf tournament. But man, it could be exciting to watch Bryson, 10 pounds heavier at that point, trying to walk around Augusta with a 48-inch driver. We'll see. I'm excited about that proposition, but DeChambeau officially validated in his science experiment, getting his first major at Winged Foot nonetheless, and doing it in a way that you should never be able to win a major at Winged Foot, and that's with having fairways not be the most important thing. Who would have thunk? Shouts to Bryson. Shouts to Matthew Wolff. I think at one point he'll get to the point where he wins a major. He didn't blow up, but he did. He just didn't have it on the back nine, and that's okay. But Bryson definitely did. 6-shot victory at Winged Foot for the scientist, and we'll see what he brings to the table at Augusta in November. But coming up next, we're going to talk about Jokic, AD, big men in the NBA, and Game 2 of the Western Conference Finals. We'll do that next on the JMULL Show on 110sportsmedia.com. Welcome back to the JMULL show on a Monday. It's a Monday. I was about to say Friday. It's definitely not a Friday. It's a Monday. Twitch.tv/110sports, 110sportsmedia.com/live. Thank you so much for joining us, making us a part of your day. Listen, there was a lot going on yesterday, and one of those things was the Western Conference Finals. A very, very closely contested game. Lakers end up winning 105-103 on a absolutely disgusting catch and shoot 3-pointer from a 7-footer. Just sort of the epitome of a 2020 NBA big. Anthony Davis coming off sort of this curl type pattern. A little bit of a defensive breakdown from the Nuggets, but then just taking sort of a fadeaway 3-pointer at the buzzer. That was Anthony Davis. 7 feet tall. On the other side of the court, you had Nikola Jokic, who also epitomizes the evolution of an NBA big. It's a little different. They, of course, play different games, but they're both shot creators. They're both playmakers. They can both defend multiple positions and score anywhere on the floor. They're both roughly 7 feet tall. Jokic is a primary ball handler for the Nuggets. One of the best players in the NBA. He and AD are two of, right now the two best big men in the NBA. They combined for 22 points in the fourth quarter. They were the best players on their teams in that quarter. Jokic, of course, the best player on that team. LeBron, out of respect, if nothing else, still holds that title for the Lakers. But last night was a perfect example of what the modern NBA big has become. You can't, if you're going to spend a ton of money on an NBA big, they have to be able to do what Jokic and AD can do. Take over games. Because those are the teams. Because here's how this goes. The best teams in the NBA right now, they either pay their bigs a ton of money because they're some of the best players in the NBA, or they pay them almost no money and have multiple guys not making a whole lot of money to play center by committee based on the situation. Let me explain. The Heat are going to pay Bam Adebayo a lot more money when they get a chance, because Bam is a playmaker. He can protect the rim. Ask Jason Tatum about that. He can defend a ton of positions. No guard. I haven't seen a guard in these playoffs take Bam off the dribble, which is impressive. He's a shot creator for himself, a shot creator for others. He can defend multiple positions. He's a shot blocker. He can also guard in space. He's elite. So he's going to get paid a lot of money. You can say the same about Anthony Davis. You can say the same about Nikola Jokic. You can say the same about Giannis. All of those guys are some of the best players in the NBA. And they get paid a lot of money. Or they're going to get paid a lot of money. Karl Anthony Towns. Joel Embiid. Or you're talking about the Celtics. And even the Lakers have some by committee, certainly the backup position with JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard. Or you have the Celtics, who spend all of their money on wings. Jaylen Brown, Gordon Hayward, Jason Tatum, Kemba Walker, throw him in there. And then you've got your centers. You got Daniel Tice, Enes Kanter, Grant Williams, Robert Williams, all of who bring something a little different to the floor. so that Brad Stevens has 4 different guys he can go to in a certain situation. Tice is their most versatile player, a good defender who can, he struggled a little bit in these playoffs, but capable of knocking down the 3-pointer. Robert Williams and Grant Williams, certainly, Grant Williams, very versatile, can also help with some playmaking. And then Enes Kanter, who is very much your typical sort of old school NBA big. But they spend all their money elsewhere. And most teams should spend their money elsewhere because most teams don't have guys of the talent of Jokic or AD. But man, look at what they can do when they are this good. When you've got a big that can guard multiple positions, that can create his own shot. I mean, they were going back and forth. AD and Jokic going back and forth in a playoff game. A close one. It's not exactly how often do you hear that, we got a classic in the first round with, LeBron versus Melo. Or it's Jimmy Butler versus Jason Tatum, perimeter guys. Kawhi Leonard versus Kevin Durant. Steph Curry versus James Harden. LeBron versus KD. LeBron versus Kawhi. Not so often nowadays do you get Jokic versus Embiid versus AD, or anybody for that matter. AD versus take your pick, because maybe it's AD versus Bam, but Bam's not quite that kind of offensive talent yet that can just completely take over a game like that. Once he gets to the point where he's knocking down 3-pointers more consistently, then we're talking more than we already are, because he's pretty darn good. But man, those bigs are big time. No pun intended. This was this game sort of epitomized the makeup of these two teams. You got Murray and Jokic combined for 55. You get 15 from Michael Porter Jr., who had a really, a pretty solid game. But Jokic and Murray leading the way, and you hope to get a little something else from your role players. On the other side of things, Davis and LeBron, 57. I mean, I know we probably shouldn't make it that simple, but all I'm saying is that LeBron and AD got 57, Jokic and Murray got 55, Lakers won by 2. I know it's not that simple, but it's not all that more complicated than that. You had 11 from KCP and Danny Green, but that's pretty much all. Alex Caruso had his 4 minutes of elite bench spark, and if he'd made that shot in the final possession, or the second to last possession, then NBA Twitter would have exploded. But Anthony Davis making that shot certainly fits a little bit better, makes a little bit more sense. But it was the Lakers' 2 best guys versus the Nuggets' 2 best guys, and in this particular game, it was one of the Nuggets' best players versus one of the Lakers' best players. It was Jokic versus AD, and listen, Jokic went right after AD as well. That tip-in was ridiculous. Like, only Jokic makes that kind of play. Where it's sort of like, how did you do that? You didn't jump very high. You were just sort of right there under the basket. But his game that's built on so much, offensive finesse, whether that be his passing ability or his little floaters and his Dirk Nowitzki like touch that he has. To get that little tip in like that was really something special. And then to do what he did in the second to last possession of the game was also spectacular. This Nuggets team has a ton of fight. And while this series, I would say, is pretty much over, I don't see them winning 4 or 5 against LeBron and AD. They bring it every night. It's really impressive, and they won both of the quarters in the second half. Down by 10 at halftime, won the third quarter by 6 and the fourth quarter by 2. It took a defensive letdown, quite frankly, at the end of that game to get the shot that was that good. I mean, it was money out of his hand. It really was. But the Nuggets are for real. And those two players in particular are absolutely ridiculous. Jokic and Murray, 31 combined in the second half. LeBron had 6 in the second half, but AD, 22 points on 8 of 13 shooting. Got to the free throw line 4 times. Just absolutely exploded in the second half after a, quite frankly, slightly fairly underwhelming first half, 3 of 10. But man, was he good in that fourth quarter. Incredibly impressive. And winning that game does so much for the Lakers. 1-1 and 2-0 is so incredibly different. Now you have to look at it as, quite simply, you need the Nuggets to win 4 out of 5, and I find it really hard to believe that the Nuggets are going to win 4 out of 5 now that they're down 2-0. Now, like I said at the top of the show, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they win Game 3. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if they find a way to win 2 games here. Before this series started, I said, I think the Lakers will go up 3-1. The Nuggets will get 1 when they're down 3-1, and then LeBron and the Lakers will win it in 6. That seems to be on the table at this point, but I find it really hard to believe that the Nuggets find a way to win 4 of the next 5 against a team who doesn't lack the discipline that, the mental fortitude and the intensity and focus that the Clippers lacked. This is a LeBron Lakers team, and AD doesn't seem all that interested in giving up leads right now either. But heck of a basketball game, and watching Jokic and AD go at it one-on-one down the stretch really was a ton of fun to watch and really impressive on both accounts. And really they epitomize what the modern NBA big is at this point. And whoever gets out of the West in the next 4 to 5 years, they're going to have to go through one of those two guys. And that's daunting for whoever it is, because both of those guys are major mismatches and capable of taking over games like we saw in Game 2. Coming up next, we're going to talk about the Week 2 injuries in the NFL. It hit a lot of teams hard and a lot of fantasy football managers hard. We'll do that next on the JMULL Show on 110sportsmedia.com. Welcome back to the JMULL Show on a Monday. Twitch.tv/110sports, 110sportsmedia.com/live. Listen, week 2 injuries, they hit hard. They hit hard. Right at the heart. I don't know what that was. I apologize for that. And whatever accent I was going for there. But week 2 injuries, a lot of them. A lot of important ones too. So we're going to do this in multiple categories. First, we're going to go with fantasy football horrors. The ones that keep these managers up at night. There was managers, that were hyped because that they had the number 1 pick. And they were slaving over, okay, who do I take? Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley. What's the play here? Clearly, the play was somebody other than those two. Now, of course, you can't possibly know that, but Christian McCaffrey, Adam Schefter just reported that Christian McCaffrey is expected to miss multiple weeks. He's out with an ankle injury. McCaffrey was dealing with a minor ankle injury during the game, was able to limp off after a touchdown in the fourth quarter, and said he was fine after the game. But Adam Schefter reporting just about 20 minutes ago that McCaffrey expected to miss multiple weeks. That's a tough blow for your fantasy football owners. What's an even tougher blow for your fantasy football owners is the guys, whoever picked Saquon Barkley in your league. Because Saquon Barkley has an expected torn ACL. His injury, it sets the Giants back another year. And I'm really big on on just missing out on opportunities to have as many pieces of your rebuild together as possible, even if that doesn't necessarily mean that you were going to be good. Like, the Giants were going to be good either way. But you like to think that at some point your quarterback, your running back, Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley, you'd like to think that at some point they get to the point where they're cohesive enough that you've got a good team around them. I think that they feel okay about Daniel Jones right now in New York. Now, I don't know that for sure, and I haven't done a whole lot of reading on that. But I'm big, and it's the same way I feel like a team like the Sacramento Kings, that the Kings weren't going to push for the playoff, push to make a lot of noise in the playoffs. But they come to the bubble, and again, they're not fully healthy. Marvin Bagley III, another year in which he's not super healthy. De'Aaron Fox dealing with some injuries. It's just another year that you're not really sure what you actually have. And that's not to say that you're not sure what you have. That you have an incredible talent in Saquon Barkley. That's not a question like it is for Marvin Bagley III still. But it's another year in which you're not entirely sure what you have as a team because of that. So, because, if Daniel Jones has a bad season the rest of the time, is it because he's bad, or is it because everyone knows that they're not going to run the football as much anymore because you don't have Saquon Barkley? If their running back has whatever running back they put in there, if he is horrible, is it because he's bad or the offensive line isn't great? If the receivers don't have great years, is it because they're just going against defenses that are scheming for nothing but the pass? All of these questions are things that matter, because when you're completely healthy and your quarterback gets sacked a bunch and your running backs don't have a great year, it's probably because you need more work on your offensive line. If all of your wide receivers are completely healthy, but Daniel Jones has a bad year because he can't find anybody to throw the ball to, then maybe you need more wide receivers. better wide receivers in your core on your depth chart. These questions become a whole lot more difficult to answer when you lose the center of your offense. Saquon Barkley, expected torn ACL. And like I said, it makes it more difficult to evaluate Daniel Jones because they have some weapons around him with Barkley, Evan Ingram, Sterling Shepard, Golden Tate. Those 5 players have been on the field together alongside Jones for a total of 5 snaps. 5 snaps. That's not a whole lot of time to gauge what you got in your quarterback when you feel like you have weapons around him. McCaffrey, that's a little different because, the Panthers weren't going to be... Things are really very much up in the air for the Panthers right now. So we'll see, first of all, we'll see how many weeks he ends up missing. Clearly, it doesn't seem like he's going to be out for the season. But if nothing else, there's another injury there for McCaffrey. The next section we're going to is starting quarterbacks. And poor Broncos and 49ers, because both of these guys have very important players that are out now. Drew Lock, a sprained AC joint. This is another example of not really being able to gauge what you have. And you can still, to a certain extent, see what you have in Daniel Jones when Daniel Jones isn't the one who gets hurt. But when Drew Lock gets hurt, Broncos quarterback, it makes it a lot harder to gauge what you have in him because, he misses time. And then if he does come back, is he completely healthy? Is he still just trying to get his feet wet again? There are these other questions. And when you're trying to evaluate quarterbacks, you're trying to evaluate quickly and then move on or double down. Sitting around for years, multiple seasons, trying to evaluate a quarterback rather than, making a trade or going out and getting another one in the draft or moving on, it just makes that a lot more difficult when your quarterback is hurt. He separated his shoulder in the first half against the Steelers on Sunday. That is Drew Lock. He'll miss 2 to 6 weeks, with the schedule subject to what doctors find when Lock has an MRI this week. Returns in week 7. The Denver season could be pretty much over by week 8, week 9, if that's when he comes back. You know what I mean? And then you're talking about, a quarterback in garbage time, essentially. And that's not the best place to gauge what you have in a quarterback either. Jeff Driscoll, the backup in Denver right now. The Broncos released Joe Flacco to get out from his ridiculous contract. And now you're just sort of in limbo if you're Denver. Jimmy Garoppolo, high ankle sprain. He should be able to play through his injury, but listen, Jimmy Garoppolo is a big one and certainly an issue for this 49ers team. The bigger one, though, is probably the most impactful injury in terms of finality, and this guy's not coming back, and it's Nick Bosa, expected torn ACL. Bosa reportedly tore his ACL in the 49ers' 31-13 victory over the Jets. It's not a career-threatening injury, but unless it was a misdiagnosis, he's going to miss the rest of the regular season, and that's a big deal because this is a 49ers team that had aspirations of winning a Super Bowl. He was on the field a ton as a rookie after being drafted number 2 overall in the 2019 draft. Bosa was on his way to being an incredibly impactful NFL player, and it's not it's like you said, it's not going to absolutely threaten his future or anything, but it does change the dynamic of the 49ers here. And now that the Seahawks are 2-0 in the division, it's looking more and more likely that the Seahawks are going to control that division, because now the 49ers are missing the cornerstone of their defense, or at least the cornerstone of their front seven. And their quarterback isn't completely healthy. That makes things a lot more difficult. Real quickly, before we go to break here, Cortland Sutton, another injury. That's Denver Broncos wide receiver Devontae Adams, wide receiver over in Green Bay. The Baltimore Ravens defense took a hit with Devon Young. Malik Hooker, Indianapolis Colts, same thing. Raheem Mostert, also a 49er, also going down with the sprained MCL. Tyrod Taylor, you got to see a little bit of Justin Herbert as a result, but that's not good for them. A lot of important players got injured over the weekend, and there's going to be an impact on what that means for the rest of this season. Coming up next, we'll do some FYI. Get out of here on a Monday. You're watching the JMULL Show on 110sportsmedia.com. Welcome back to the JMULL Show on a Monday. I wish it was a Friday, because I've almost said it like 2 or 3 times on the show now. But for your information, let's wrap up the show here with some FYI. Astros ace Justin Verlander yesterday said, or a couple days ago now, said that he will undergo Tommy John surgery, effectively ending his season. A big blow for the Astros, a team who found their footing a little bit. And when you have that kind of the pitching staff, they were banking on some older guys, and this is what can happen when you're banking on older guys, is you get into a situation where they need surgery, and now you're very much in a position where the margin for error is a lot smaller than it used to be. Bryson DeChambeau could have changed golf with the fact that he proved that his science experiment works. Everything in this world is a copycat game. Specifically sports. I mean, the Warriors did what they did, and now everybody wants to shoot as many threes as possible. Bryson DeChambeau has been pretty darn good since he gained 40 pounds of muscle. He didn't just go and eat ice cream. He's eating a lot of potatoes. He's drinking 6 protein shakes a day. He's eating a lot of potatoes, a lot of meat, a lot of steak. So not 40 pounds of fat. Just he's huge, built. He just won a U.S. Open, and he did it on a golf course and in a fashion that you're not supposed to be able to do it on that golf course in that fashion. It's a very interesting conversation. Has he changed the way that golf will ultimately be played? And he talked about completely changing golf and changing the way it's played and making history, and maybe he did that. There's certainly a chance that he did that. I'm going to give you we're getting very close to the end of Major League Baseball's 60-game schedule, getting closer and closer to the playoffs. My esteemed colleague Chris Brown over at 110sportsmedia.com been pumping out power rankings for Major League Baseball every week. Here's what we got in the top 10 this week. We got the Cleveland Indians at 10 at 29 and 24. The Cubs, Braves, Twins, Yankees, that's 9, 8, 7, 6. And then the top 5 is the Athletics at 33 and 20. The Tampa Bay Rays at 35 and 19. Most of these teams at this point have clinched a playoff spot. And then the Padres, who clinched a playoff spot for the first time in 14 years, 34 and 20, and they're third in his power rankings, followed by the White Sox at 2, and of course, the best team in baseball, the Los Angeles Dodgers at 38 and 16. They've been at the top of his power rankings for quite a long time. We're getting very close to the end of the baseball season. So if you're wanting to catch up on what's going on in the sport, as we get close to the end of the season, Around the Bases with Chris Brown tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern, right here at 110sportsmedia.com or twitch.tv/110sports. Prior to that, at 11 a.m., we've got the owner of the European Soccer Top 25, Josh Doring, Touchline Talk with him at 11 a.m. Eastern right here as well. Both of those shows will be live tomorrow right here in the same spot. I'll be back on Wednesday, see what we have to talk about. There's actually not a ton going on between now and then. Maybe we'll have Chris on the show to talk about some baseball, but we've got no basketball. We got some basketball tomorrow night, but just one game. Maybe we're talking a 2-2 series tie between the Heat and Celtics, but we shall see when we actually get there. Either way, I'll be back here same time, 11 a.m. Eastern on Wednesday. Until then, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, stay safe, and I'll see you right back here on Wednesday.